Now, the government is increasing limiting our freedoms. And the White House has slowly been taking them away. It wasn't just this White House. It was the last White House as well. It's been happening for a long time. But everything is accelerated. The last thing on this board is war, collapse, hate, and then control. Tomorrow, I'm doing a show on 1984. It's a 2-hour special, and you're not going to believe the stuff this government can do and is doing. It is quite possibly the scariest show we've ever done because it's all absolutely 100% real. You want to talk, well, let me get into this story. The TSA. Yesterday, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul was detained at a Nashville airport. Here's Rand, and he was detained at the airport, and he was going through the screener, but he was stopped because it showed he had something on his leg. Well, he pulled up his pant leg, but he was told, you have to get a pat down. Well, he said, there's nothing on my leg. You can look at it. He said, I'll go back through the screener a second time. They said, no, you can't do it. And he said, well, there's nothing on my leg. You've seen it. You said it was on my leg. Here it is. There's nothing on my leg. Let me go through again. Well, absolutely not. Sir, you're getting belligerent. No, His request went to the manager, and then the manager's manager, and then the manager's manager, and then the manager's manager's manager finally showed up. He was detained. White House says he wasn't detained. He says he was. Which one do you believe? I take Rand Paul. Here he is, a sitting senator, almost as dangerous as a grandpa or a grandma. We have to check their diapers, you know. Good thing TSA detained him. Yeah. Well, no, actually it's not. They didn't find anything on his leg. I talked to him earlier today on my radio program, and we talked about how all of this ended and why it happened. Watch.
I walked out with the police to outside the airport barrier, and then at that point, someone from the TSA finally got to the airport, the manager, and he finally then said, well, we'll just let you go back through screening. And I said, well, that's all I've ever asked for. I haven't asked for any special treatment. But here's what I learned through this, Glenn. Apparently, I was selected randomly by the machine, and the TSA is not owning up to this. 2 of them told me privately that the machine is picking people for for random pat-downs because they don't want you to complain about being picked for random. They want you to think the machine has found something, so they're letting the machine pick the random folks for pat-down, but they're denying this. The TSA has put out a written statement denying this, but 2 of them privately yesterday told me that, yes, that's the reason when I went back through the machine without changing any clothing, it didn't pick up or sense anything. I think it's not that the machines are broken, it's that they don't want to admit that you're being selected at random for pat-downs.
So, there it is. So the machine is the bad guy. Since the government doesn't want you to know that you're just being selected. Pat down. Pat, who is on my radio program, he went a year ago. He was pat down at the airport, and he said he was molested, and he means it. He's like, he ain't touching my junk again. But you know what? They have touched his junk again because he's been patted down again because he's not going to stop flying. So what do? Pat down, even though they were lying to him about something on his leg. No, he has to be patted down. So they hit some sort of quota. You may not have even done anything wrong, but there you go. You know, I agree with about half of what Ron Paul, this guy's father, says. About half of it. The other half, he's absolutely right. Ron Paul said that he thinks our police state in this country is getting out of control, and he's absolutely right. And he's the only one who's really telling you about it. He actually wants to cut $1 trillion in spending by eliminating the TSA. A reason for someone to consider voting for Ron Paul or finding a candidate that does believe that. There's another example where the government slowly takes away our liberties. Slowly does it. Senator Rand Paul agreed with me. Watch.
It's a matter of submission. Everybody has to submit, and you submit to an indignity, and then they'll add another indignity in about 6 months if they discover a new way to attack us. The bottom line is we do need to have security in the airports, but there are many ways in which we can be attacked. In fact, it probably is less likely the next time we're attacked it'll be with a plane, it'll be in another way. And we do need to do things. I'm not saying we don't have security. We need to be smart about it, and we need to balance our security and our liberty and not just give up all of our privacy and liberty in order to try to be safe, because I think sometimes the universality that everybody's a potential terrorist actually doesn't make us safer, because we're wasting time on people who are not a threat and not targeting or spending time with the people who are a threat.
There's a couple of other ways that control is coming. The government is squeezing us to death. There's the latest on encrypted files. There's a new court ruling that could set a new precedent on government access to personal laptops. A federal judge in Colorado said the Fifth Amendment does not apply to encryption. So he ordered a woman to decrypt the hard drive of her laptop after she refused to do so when the FBI seized it during a raid of her home. She's accused of fraud for her role in a mortgage scam. If she doesn't encrypt her files by February 21st, she could be held in contempt of court. Legal analysts are calling this a precedent-setting case because you now must offer evidence against yourself. You don't have to do that. You don't have to answer any questions, but you now have to decrypt if the government decides to decrypt. Then we have the GPS tracking device. I consider this one a win for the people, by the way. We're having a scary discussion on the Supreme Court. They unanimously agreed to have police get a search warrant before using GPS to track criminals who are suspected of a crime. They don't even need a court order. In some places, they just put that little GPS tracking device under the wheel well of your car. They can track you wherever you go. Why go to all that trouble? Just let's get Google to track you with your phone. You'd think that you'd need to have a court order, but police in Washington, D.C. used GPS to track a Jeep of a suspect, which led them to his home where he was stashing money and drugs. So it worked. So what's the problem? I don't care if they showed me going to the grocery store. Oh. He was then sentenced to life in prison, but an appeals court overturned his conviction. All 9 Supreme Court justices, all 9, said the GPS monitoring of this guy violated his Fourth Amendment rights. But why stop there? We've already got the Fifth and the Fourth. ACLU says the ruling is an important victory for privacy. I cannot believe I'm cheering for the ACLU. Now let's move to student records. Think about how well your kid does in school, or how poorly they do. Private information, right? Think again. Since No Child Left Behind was passed, states have been required to keep track of all kinds of good information about students, like grades and test scores, but also things like economic status, disciplinary problems, and in some cases, students who get pregnant. All 50 states collect this information. Guess how many of them let you, the parents, see the file? How many? New report shows 8. I'm sorry, but we don't even know the test scores, disciplinary problems, who paid for his education or any other information about the President of the United States. We don't know any of that. But they know it about your kid. His records have never been released. Why would the government need to store that information about its private citizens? What business is it? I'll bet you that there is a good portion of this audience that says, well, no big deal. No big deal. Well, what difference does it make? So they have my test scores. We're too willing to give up our freedom and our information for our security. But I know I don't have to tell you what Benjamin Franklin said about that. He who is willing to sacrifice freedom for security deserves neither and will lose both. It is more true today than it was 240 years ago. And you will see that tomorrow on this broadcast. Tomorrow, 1984. Government now has the ability to monitor every aspect of your life. Much more frightening than the book 1984. Wait until you see what they can and are doing, how they're tracking you. Please tell a friend and join me here tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Back in a minute.